Howdy y'all, welcome back. Today, we will look at one of the most deeply mysterious cities in American history, one which, from its very foundation, served as a symbol for a much deeper or more esoteric power. Furthermore, as I dove into the history of this city, I was hard-pressed to find any photograph of this immaculate city that did not seem to showcase a fully electrified trolley system which already was serving the city throughout the 19th century. Like so many feats of engineering in the Midwest, we also have some designs that are considered to be cutting edge, and many defied what was believed to be possible at that time. Today, we will be looking at the great city of Cincinnati, Ohio, thoroughly diving into some of the most detailed photographs I have ever seen taken of a city well over 100 years ago. Furthermore, Cincinnati, from two-story tall doorways to massive castle-like structures littered throughout the city, in its earliest photographs was a city where architecture appeared to be more advanced than what was alluded to in the current narrative. We have entire blocks of the city, as you can see, that appear like massive superstructures. We also have, when diving into the history of Cincinnati, in the earliest panoramic photograph of a Midwestern city in the United States, Cincinnati was photographed in 1848, and within this image, we can see a sprawling metropolis, already completely built out, with what appears to be a series of massive masonry and brick buildings. But what truly makes this particular photograph stand out is that the streets, or lack thereof, are almost completely barren of development. The streets all appear to be dirt and mud. However, as we begin to look at photographs from the late 19th century and the early 20th century, we begin to see that a plan was employed, some say inherited, from a more powerful group which led Cincinnati to be almost entirely electrified by the year 1900, with this entire city utilizing an electric trolley system for public transportation, as well as many inclines engineered to fight Cincinnati's steep terrain. I found significantly more detail in many of these photographs of Cincinnati than I have found in almost any other photographs of a major city taken before the year 1910. Now here is where we get to the current narrative, which I will keep as brief as possible. The land of Cincinnati, according to the mainstream history, has been occupied since at least 900 AD. This occupation was by the Fort Ancient people, a sister tribe of the Mound Builders, both tribes deriving from the earlier Hopewell culture, also known for mounds and earthworks. With zero mention of the Little Ice Age, we're told the landscape of Cincinnati was only greatly changed, greatly affected with the arrival of European settlers, which occurred around the mid-1600s. We're told these settlers drove the indigenous people, which at that time mainly were the Shawnee, from their dwellings and the earthworks, and the Europeans also began trading with the Iroquois, who were said to be an enemy of the Shawnee at this time period. Again, the history here has lackluster details at best. How big were the earthworks of Cincinnati? How many mounds existed on this land? Why did the indigenous people of Cincinnati claim that this landscape was built by giants? Disputes over Ohio land continued well into the 7 Years' War and further through the Revolutionary War of America. Cincinnati was considered key to the westward expansion of the fledgling United States, but the question becomes, why? In 1786, a man named Benjamin Stiles was said to have traveled near present-day Cincinnati and discovered the soil to be extremely fertile. Could this at all have to do with the many earthworks which may have once existed here? The very next year, 1787, the Miami Purchase was completed, and over 300,000 acres, or roughly 487 square miles, was sold to Judge John Cleves Sims of New Jersey. In 1788, again, just 1 year after the purchase, Fort Washington, near present-day Cincinnati, was constructed and was settled with occupants from Fort Pitt, a similar star fort in Pennsylvania. Today, part of this original fortification of Cincinnati, Fort Washington, lies beneath the Lunken Airport, and this is considered the location of the first settlement of Cincinnati. Originally, the settlement was known as Losantiville. However, when the original surveyor disappeared in 1788, a new surveyor named Israel Ludlow was chosen, who redesigned the town plan and eventually contributed to renaming the city. The Star Fort Washington stood until 1808, housing upwards of 613 troops. However, it was Ludlow's effect on the city which truly bears questioning. Arthur St. Clair, governor of the Northwest Territory, with encouragement directly from Israel Ludlow, renamed Losantiville to Cincinnati, named after a secret fraternal order known as the Society of Cincinnati. Again, if we read between the lines here, the Freemasonry we see in all of these photographs obviously has more to the story than the current narrative gives it credit for. The Society of Cincinnati, the Fraternal Order of Cincinnati, was founded in the United States in 1783 to commemorate the Revolutionary War. Membership was initially restricted to veterans. Now, listen to this. The Society of Cincinnati was founded on May 13, 1783 by Henry Knox in Fishkill, New York. Henry Knox was not only a founding father of the United States of America, but was also considered the leading bookseller in America, also serving as chief of the artillery for George Washington. Just as a thought exercise, if we came to inherit on these battlefields rather than to battle, then those who were well-versed, well-read in ancient and old world knowledge would become highly valuable. Would a bookseller not have access to vital information, and would not the largest bookseller in America have key pieces of old world technology described within the works that he possessed? Henry Knox is also the namesake of Fort Knox in Kentucky, containing most of the United States' gold, but that is an entirely different can of worms. The motto of the Society of Cincinnati is, "He relinquished everything to save the Republic," which is thought to be in reference to the Society's namesake, Lucius Quintus Cincinnatus, who apparently was the model for Roman virtue, civic virtue, and was represented by his symbol, the fasces. The most famous story related to Cincinnatus occurs after he retired, and he was known for retiring from public Roman service to lead a simple life of farming. Cincinnatus was also well known as one of the Roman consuls and dictators who greatly opposed any rights for the working class, the plebeians. While promising reform to the plebeians of Rome, Cincinnatus, once in office, actually passed laws which brought the working class further into poverty and eventually allowed violence against plebeians who attempted to speak up. Does this remind you of anything going on right now? And all of this begs the question, why was this Roman leader, of all leaders, chosen as the head of a secret fraternal order in the United States of America? And further, why was that secret order, only 7 years old in 1790, chosen as the namesake for the massive city of Cincinnati? The population of the settlement of Cincinnati grew rapidly from 1790 onward, and a wide range of businesses were established by 1795, including over 30 warehouses and factories, all built in 5 years or less, all said to be masonry. Is that possible? Cincinnati wasn't officially chartered as a town until January 1st, 1802. By 1803, Cincinnati had a night watch that roamed the castle-like structures, protecting the city from attacks. By 1811, steamships began traversing through Cincinnati, and in 1819, on February the 5th, Cincinnati was officially incorporated as a city. By 1820, the population of Cincinnati had exceeded 10,000 people and continued to grow throughout the time of the first photograph taken of the city in 1848. By 1850, the population of Cincinnati was over 115,000 people, many of them being Jewish, and Cincinnati had the first Jewish hospital in all of America. By 1853, Cincinnati was said to have employed the use of electricity in some of its buildings, as well as establishing the Cincinnati Fire Department, the first full-time paid fire department in the entire country. The Cincinnati Fire Department of the mid-19th century was said to be so cutting-edge, it incorporated the use of steam engines in their fire vehicles, a design that was later adopted by nearly every other major fire department in the country. Cincinnati also had a large African American population and was considered one of the most important cities on the Underground Railroad, as Cincinnati bordered slave states like Kentucky, and Cincinnati was key in the process of freeing individuals from neighboring lands. Cincinnati also had the first African American church in Ohio, which was founded as Allen Temple Methodist in 1824. The abolitionist movement was said to have been spearheaded in Cincinnati, Ohio, and the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin, the second greatest selling book of the 19th century after the Bible, was conceived and partially written in Cincinnati by Harriet Beecher Stowe. Many historians, including Thomas Gassett, claim the Republican Party and the cries to end slavery arose directly from the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin and became the driving force in the creation of the Republican Party. The National Underground Railroad Museum, known as the Freedom Center, is also located in Cincinnati, Ohio. At the time of these photographs, roughly 1848 through 1910, Cincinnati had many nicknames, including the Queen of the West due to her castle-like architecture and abundance. Cincinnati was also known as Porkopolis, as over 40 factories and packing houses existed in the city that were dedicated to pork. This becomes a rather interesting detail, given that Cincinnati was also one of the largest Jewish populations in America. Cincinnati also was known as the New Rome, or the City of Seven Hills in America, akin to Rome, as Cincinnati was said to have had 7 significant and ancient hills: Mount Adams, Walnut Hills, Mount Auburn, Vine Street Hill, College Hill, Fairmount Hill, and Mount Harrison. If we consider the fact that Cincinnati was once home to the mound builders and others who constructed massive earthworks, and was also home to a series of forts including a star fort, one must wonder if these hills in Cincinnati might not have a more esoteric history. Cincinnati was Ohio's largest city throughout the end of the 19th century, with an average of 37,143 people per square mile. The Cincinnati Reds, also known as the Cincinnati Red Stockings, became the United States' first professional sports team in 1869. And if you know anything about the history of baseball, it quite literally evolved out of a game that was previously played around the indigenous mounds. Where does a pitcher throw from? The mound. And these details go on, but I digress. Cincinnati was home to Procter & Gamble, founded here in 1879. By 1880, Cincinnati became the first city to completely own a railroad, the Cincinnati Southern Railroad. By 1887, Cincinnati provided over $200 million in goods to the rest of the country, and was Ohio's leading industrial, political, literary, and educational center. That is when we arrive to the time of these photographs, and remarkably, following these photographs, Cincinnati appears to become very stagnant in growth. For example, the city's population did not increase much over the 20th century. In the 1880s, there were over 300,000 people living in Cincinnati, yet in the year 2000, that number had only increased to 365,000 people. Many of those can be associated with the city becoming larger at 77 square miles. Essentially, Cincinnati was much larger, much busier, much more dense, and more important when the history of the city was still very mysterious. But can this current narrative be trusted at all? And can this ancient Star Fort city, previously an indigenous fort, this 19th century city built with electricity and extremely advanced architecture and engineering, could this ancient city of Cincinnati, named after one of America's first secret fraternal orders, really have fallen so quickly from the 20th century onward? Or was the fall of Cincinnati, like so many other great cities, an orchestrated plot by nefarious parties desperately fighting and clamoring to hide the history of their misdeeds? I'm going to wrap up this video by asking everyone out there, what have the last 4 years been like for you? What has occurred over the last 4 years in your city? What can you tell me that has improved? What can you tell me that has gotten worse? Can you afford the life that you desire to live? And can you truly speak to the evils that you see happening around you, or the lack thereof? Will you be blindsided, or will you be torn down by the history that they place upon you? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. What has occurred over the last 4 years in America is nothing short of abysmal. So don't be fooled and do not turn a blind eye. We are not indentured servants. What I'm trying to say is protect America, go out and vote. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about the history of Cincinnati down below. These photographs are some of the most detailed images I have ever seen. We're looking at things like theme parks. We're looking at things like Luna parks, like illuminated parks, like electricity parks. We're looking at electric trolleys. We're looking at these rising funiculars all throughout the city. And what is moreover, we have all of the architecture, the castle-like structures of the Queen City that is all tied together, known as the ancient Star Fort city. But this city, when it was Fort Washington, was quickly built over. All of the history throughout Cincinnati has always been built over. It's layer upon layer of convoluted nonsense. But as we dive into the photographs, we can see what truly lies below the surface. So again, take what you know, go out and vote. I can't wait to read your comments down below, and we will talk very soon on the next video.